technical.
All right, we're
Very
recording
difficult.
now. Sorry about that. All right, the basics. It's not. We didn't miss too much, anyways. This is going to be valuable to everyone who's here. So we're talking about motivation, goals, and intent. Why are you hosting in the first place? We said that club programming is one of the reasons you might host a disc golf event. Whether your region doesn't have events, like Corey, for instance, she hosts most of the events, if not all the events, at the St. Joseph or Mountain View Disc Golf Course, and I know Chad's here now too, and they have the Sault Ste. Marie 9-hole courses up there, and they're hosting an event. They're actually hosting an event on the way up to Knock this year too. A lot of the time, that's why you'll step up, is we want actual competition in our region. Again, you might think that there's not adequate competition in your region too. Places like, say, Southern Ontario, South Central Ontario, we've got plenty of courses, but it doesn't necessarily mean there's a TD at every course, or there's adequate programming to serve the greater need of, or greater demand of disc golf. And you've seen that. Anyone's tried to register for an event this year knows it's like a lottery. And so the more events that we can have across Ontario, the more availability and the more access that people are going to have too. So it definitely aligns with the ODSA's mission, which is inclusivity. And the way we're trending right now, disc golf events are quickly becoming exclusive. So club programming and programming in your region is really important. Another reason for a disc golf event is the fundraiser. And oftentimes this isn't independent of club programming or another necessity to have an event in your region. You might need money for tee pads, or you might have a charity you're looking to donate to. Tobin's got a great I think story right here with the I think he just turned his video off. I was going to ask him to give an anecdote here, but with the Kings Forest Disc Golf Club, for instance, this year, that club was meant to get programming on the course, but it also drove a fundraiser for the Sick Kids Hospital, I want to say. Tobin?
Yes, we took $1 from each weekly membership fee, or sorry, weekly entry fee, and just kept extrapolating that and adding it up, and at the end of the year, it actually becomes a large amount. So you can utilize your club to look good in the community and draw more people out as well.
Right. And that's an example of where a league was used to fundraise, right? When we talk about events, we're not just talking about tournaments. We're talking about the whole gamut of events. And King's Force is another great example of a fundraiser event there, too. If you participate in the doubles event we held there, the city gave us $10,000 to build that course. And you cannot build a 18-hole disc golf course for $10,000. So instead, we decided to fundraise our butts off. We held a doubles event. We sold T-shirts. We sold hats. We sold discs to make up the other $10,000 we needed. And because of it, we now have a 3 turf tee pad professional basket seasonal course in Hamilton. It's great. It's an awesome way to fundraise. You can fundraise all the way from $5,000 to $10,000 with a properly run event that's transparent and people know that ahead of time. It's awesome. And then for profit too. We have this kind of stigma in Ontario that TDs or event organizers should always be organizing the event out of the goodness of their heart. Now, once you've organized a single event properly, you realize that it's a lot of work for the goodness of your heart to handle. So, I don't see an issue with us transitioning eventually to for-profit events. And there are already companies. A lot of the flex tours are for-profit flex tours too. There's a lot of margin built into disc golf discs and merching out events. So I see no issue with it because it increases the capacity to host and for competition in the province too. So oftentimes you'll get people hosting for-profit flex tours or for-profit events, and that's fine. The PGA on sanctioned events even allows for a 15% contingency towards a profit margin too for TDs. So that's pretty cool. Once you decide why the heck you're hosting your event, you have to decide what type of event you're going to host. And so when we hear about disc golf events, most of us think of tournaments. The traditional singles tournament, a stroke play, 1 round all the way up to 4 rounds, 1 day all the way to 2 days, sometimes 3 if you're playing an event like Foxwood this year. That's a Friday, Saturday, Sunday. You're going to have to take into consideration what type of event you want to host. There are, like we said, those traditional tournaments. There's leagues. We have weekly leagues. Most clubs in Ontario now host a weekly league. It's usually a doubles format, but there are a lot of singles leagues out in Ontario. Sometimes they switch seasonally. Christie Lake's a great example. They do doubles in the winter when it's a little bit hairier, the conditions, and tougher to throw, and then they do their handicap singles league in the summer too. So doubles can be applied to both leagues and traditional events too. And then there's specialty events too. So Simon, maybe you could detail what some of those specialty events you'll see across Ontario are.
Hi, everyone. I'm Simon Shaw. I'm a Prodigy ambassador. So the event that I like to run is the Par 2. It's about growing the sport. We also have a club member, Graham. He's doing his first event ever, and he's running a Trilogy Challenge. No, sorry, MVP Circuit Challenge.
And this is at Bronte Creek.
At Bronte Creek, yeah. And then we have Darren Brisseth. He also runs called the Tie Dye, and I think it's in its seventh. It's going to be in its seventh season. Again, these are all unsanctioned events that you can host. I know Centennial, or not Centennial, but White Spruce has a lot of Trilogy challenges. And again, your league is kind of
they had fun. They didn't play disc golf.
You can do tag matches as part of specialty events, and what else is there, Chris, you can think of?
Well, I just wanted to introduce the concept, and a lot of these specialty events are unsanctioned. You can host them as PDGA events too. They would be considered X tiers, but the reason I have this slide up right now too is more to differentiate unsanctioned versus PDGA sanctioned events too. So the PDGA, we all know, it's the global sanctioning body for disc golf, and so they have a set of tour standards. They have a set of guidelines and accountabilities, both financially and rules wise, that players and TDs have to be accountable to. They also have a set of associated fees. So a lot of the time, especially if this is your first event, and I would expect for a lot of people it'd be your first event if you're going to the basics of hosting a disc golf event session like you are tonight. There's a much smaller margin or margin for error in your budgeting when it comes to the fiscal end of things. There are PDGA sanctioning fees. There are per player sanctioning fees for PDGA events as well. And then there's certain restrictions on how you spend your players' entry fees or registration fees. For instance, pros are restricted. You can't spend pros money on anything but a set number of expenses. Amateur expenses can be spent in a different way, but you have to give them back a retail value based on the tier of your event. So there's a lot more complicated set of restrictions when it comes to PDGA sanctioned events, and that's what we're going to be presenting in our advanced side of this thing. We're going to focus on PDGA events using Disc Golf Scene for registration, the back end of the PDGA website, which is an adventure all in itself, and so we're going to delve into that eventually. But this is more about choosing how you're going to approach maybe your first event or an event in general. Is that with an unsanctioned event, there's a lot more flexibility with how you budget. There's a lot more flexibility with how you operate and execute. With unsanctioned events, you can pay amateurs cash. You can't do that in a PDGA sanctioned event right now. You can have people flip their discs instead of marking their lie with a mini. You can have divisions based on whatever you'd like, where in a PDGA sanctioned event, you're going to have your division based on rating. For instance, the White Spruce tournament at the beginning of the year, I believe there was a club member who played one event in the history of his existence. He was 937 rated. And traditionally, he'd fit into the AM2 division, or so we thought, and that's where he'd be competitive. But because his rating was above 935, you can't compete in AM2 anymore. He was forced to play in a higher division than he was comfortable in. So a lot of the time when it's either your first event or you have a more informal club, reverting to an unsanctioned event just to kind of test the waters and get your feet wet is a great option. Now, Corey, I think, has a lot of insight when it comes to this. She's up in... Oh, Corey, before you give your insight, can we answer Spencer's question here? Cool. Yeah, Spencer, come off mute for a second if you want.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out something with that, and I learned this as the TD for that event, is if you have a player that goes through that exact situation that's Chris was saying, it's always good just as a TD, just say, hey, it's okay, just play through it. And in the case that I dealt with, the player was actually very happy playing MMA1 and felt like he pushed himself way higher than he ever did to play at that tier. So sometimes it seems like a bad situation, but just be transparent, I think, was the main thing that I learned from that. I just thought I would point that out.
I think, Spencer, you did a good job too of kind of addressing it with the player. It wasn't something that popped up. You discussed why, you gave him a reasoning, and then you helped him embrace, I guess, the situation. And again, this is one of those things that there are a lot of maybe not obvious rules when it comes to PDGA sanctioning. For instance, and I'm going to share this because Brad's not here, but Brad hosted the Christie Spring Fling this year. So that's a 127 player event at Christie Lake. It's usually a B tier every year, and the PDGA just announced this year that all B tier participants could no longer pay their temporary $10 PDGA fee. You would have to be a full-time PDGA member to compete in these things. So that now means that every player in your B tier event has to pay their $50 American or more fee at the beginning of the year to register and compete in your event. Now, again, when we talk about inclusivity or exclusivity, that now makes that event a lot more exclusive. It's not as inclusive. It's something where you might be ostracizing part of your club or the community you're trying to serve in the first place. So that's something you should definitely consider when trying to address whether you're going to go with the sanctioned or unsanctioned event. Obviously, there's a lot more shine to sanctioned events nowadays, a higher level of competition, but I think a lot of that is just stigma that we have as a community. Some of the most fun events I've participated in have been unsanctioned. That being said, Corey, I still would love your insight on this. Corey hosts up at Mountain View Disc Golf Course in St. Joseph Island, just south of Sault Ste. Marie. And so she's got kind of a unique perspective with her community.
Yeah, so for me, we do a lot of unsanctioned events because we're still very new and it caters to our local clientele. We're a destination place, so in order for people to come to us, they have to really want to come. So I have now run, I have 4 tournaments this year, so that will make tournaments 9, 10, 11, and 12 for me. And I've done 3 sanctioned, but for unsanctioned, you can keep your fees a little bit lower, and it really helps bring in your new people. They don't feel quite as intimidated because as soon as you put PDGA on it, a lot of your new people become very intimidated, and we don't have the numbers to draw from that you guys now have down there.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, especially if you're only hosting a couple events a year. Now, I know you've scaled the number of events you're hosting, but if you're only hosting 2 or 3 events and you're in an isolated region of Ontario and you choose to then sanction some of your events, what you're doing is you're telling these players, you're going to have to pay $50 to $75 if they're not traveling players to just to get in at the base level of competition in our region. And it's not always the right decision right off the bat. You want to develop that community first. You want to have that. If you are going to go to a sanctioned event, you're going to want to plant those seeds. Definitely. I mean, Southern Ontario can definitely take it now. But sometimes, we don't want to kind of rinse, wash, repeat, and serve the same players over and over again. If we're looking to grow the sport, and that's your intent for your event, I think unsanctioned is always the way to go. That being said, I just wanted to show you, and this is something we're going to discuss in the advanced section. This is kind of the main page of the PDGA Tour standards moving forward. And so you're going to have to learn how to decode this if you want to host a sanctioned event. Nowadays, there's restrictions based on the tier of your event. And again, Andrew, I know you're looking really closely at it right now because you're hosting a WGE event coming forward. There are some nice allowances for WGE events, especially with temporary PDGA fees. Women don't have to pay them for the WGE event. And children under, I want to say 18 still, it might be under 15 now, never have to pay PDGA fees for PDGA events to participate as well. That's not advertised on the PDGA website, but that's just kind of peace of mind for everyone here. Kids are free all the time. Women are free during the WGE events. They don't have to pay temp fees or anything like that. That being said, there are restrictions on what you give out to the pro purse. There's restrictions on added cash, on the value of the players pack for the amateurs. So this does get, when we do get granular with this, it gets quite involved, and we want to make sure that you're ready for that first. I think going through the motions and hosting the actual event before you worry about the financials and the intricacies of adhering to these tour standards is a good practice. Now,
I do want to add in, Chris, if you're rated driven competitor, you will need your PDGA number. So if you don't want to, if you want your rating to go up or down or whatever, you'll be wanting to play sanctioned events. And we'll get into more detail when we talked about the advanced, about A tiers, B tiers, and C tiers.
I think that brings up a really good point too. Just before we leave this slide, and I think there's a lot of PDGA members here already in this. I know Spencer is, Corey is, Andrea is, Mike is, Tobin, a lot of PDGA members. So I guess a good question just to the group right now, and anyone who wants to answer, I mean, just take yourself off mute. Why do you play PDGA events? Like, what's the draw to get your PDGA membership every year? I think a lot of people, I mean, might say that supporting the PGA is one of those things, but what is your quid pro quo for that entry fee every year, or that the membership fee, I should say? Anyway,
Ratings mainly, and also the TD status. Being an official allows you to do a lot more and help out with events and such. So basically,
Right.
the ratings and being able to be an official.
right. I think anyone else who wants to contribute. I know Andrea, you took your mute off too.
I didn't even know what the PDGA was. I just love playing disc golf, and my partner purchased it for me for Christmas. I
Nice.
didn't even really know what he purchased until the discs showed up, and I was like, cool, disc. And then I jumped on the website and I looked at all of the support that PDGA gives for communities, what they do with the money and the funds. And obviously, I always do things ass backwards. It's the French Canadian part. Like, it found it. I found it. So now it's like, yay, PDGA membership. But I, at the time, had no idea what it was. It was the first sparkly disc I'd ever seen. Had a turtle on it. I thought it was the coolest kid on the field with my sparkle disc.
Cool. And you're when you mentioned kind of their funding and how they build up the sport as a whole. I mean, a lot of that is completely true. They have a framework, and your event's part of a bigger system of or a bigger continuum of events, right? There's that mark in history too, where your event has been recorded on their page and is going to be part of someone's rating and someone's record, and so there is that bigger picture with PDGA events. One thing to note, and I put an asterisk beside doubles here too, is a lot of people don't know this, and I thought I'd bring it up. You do not receive personal ratings for PDGA sanctioned doubles events, so you'll rarely see a PDGA sanctioned doubles event, because all it does is it gives you that result on your event page, but none of the ratings are contributed to your personal rating because you're playing with another player. So a lot of the time people will forego paying the extra fees for a sanctioned event. Just a really brief example, the base level C tier PDGA event, you have to pay a $50 or a $75 American sanctioning fee to sanction your event. And then you're going to have to pay $2 per player in the event, and that's Canadian, to host. So if you had 72 players, you're going to pay $144 plus about $100 Canadian. So you're going to pay about, let's say, $250 Canadian extra for the sanctioning on a 72 player foursome on each hole of an 18-hole course event. So that's something you can expect to pay for that. And it scales up with the tier too. So if you go to a B tier, an A tier, an NT, etc., it gets quite a bit more expensive. But there is a higher profile and a higher potential for fundraising at that level too. But I just wanted to mention that before we move on. So we detailed a bit of the sanctioned versus unsanctioned. That's kind of what I want to focus on first. Like I say, it's always I think a smart move to go with unsanctioned for your first tournament. My first tournament was the Brawny Classic that I hosted. It was totally unsanctioned, and thank God, because I would have lost so much of my own money. And I've lost money on events. I've hosted 65 events now in disc golf, and I still to this day sometimes end up losing money on these events because of unforeseen circumstances. And so one thing we wanted to talk about, because we thought this was an important basic still, is the execution and budgeting for events. So once you choose what event you want to do, and obviously the scale of the event is going to control how much is involved in this, but the execution and budgeting is what we want to cover. So Simon actually put this together. Simon's hosted the Brawny Creek Classic for a couple of years now. He's a sponsorship guru when it comes to that, but he's just going to go over some of the basics regarding what you're considering when you're budgeting for your event, whether it's a league, a doubles event, a specialty event, what have you.
Well, as Oz mentioned, once you have a good idea of what kind of event you're going to host, you need to factor in some things like the level of adventure you want your players to have. Is it going to be like uber serious, or do you want to have some uber fun with that kind of adventure? You want to be transparent on what the entry fees are going to go to, what the value of what they're going to get. There's some guidelines that you should follow, but they're not for unsanctioned events. It's a little different, but for sanctioned events, they have some guidelines of what your fees should be, and fundraising or sponsorship and stuff. And I'll get into that a little bit. But what kind of fees you're going to use. Do you want to merch it out? Do you want to do players packs? Do you want to do cash payouts? Maybe you're just doing trophies. And then you have to factor in some registration and how you're going to collect all that money. Some of the things that you can use are DISC. The ODSA has an option for registering events and collecting money in the back scene and stuff like that. Or you can just do social like Facebook and collect people sending you PayPal or e-transfers and all that kind of stuff. And you can use social like Messenger and things like that. Some of the amenities that you're going to have to budget and think of are definitely insurance. I highly recommend that, sanctioned or unsanctioned, because it's sanctioned, you have to have it. It protects yourself and protects your club.
I'm going to butt in. You have to have insurance regardless if it's sanctioned or unsanctioned. You have to have commercial general liability to host an event. It has to be $5 million per your municipality, no matter who you are. So we provide that too. The ODSA, if you're part of an ODSA club, and you can always register your own club as a single entity too, you can get that COI that you need. It's $25 for the entire year. It's nothing. And then you get
Thank you, Chris. Some other things that you have to factor into the budget or fees is are you going to provide food and beverages? Are you going to sell this stuff on the side? Are you going to have vendors? For then you're going to need permits and permissions and all that kind of stuff. Does your host course have shelters for rain or anything like that, or just to keep you out of the sun while you're registering everybody? Those kind of factors. Will you have a practice basket for them to utilize while the course is being taken up? Because you may have to rent or buy or borrow. A driving range is also a great thing where people can go and practice and get. It doesn't even have to be on site. You can just tell them they can go to the school. So you may have to get permission or rent an area in like Bronte Park. We have lots of areas that you can rent for that kind of stuff. And do you want to do games like ace pots and I don't know, maybe you can have a hula hoop or the stacked baskets for games and stuff in between or after, just to keep people occupied. CTPs is another thing to part of the games. These things all cost money. So then that comes to it is when you get into sponsorship is what do you need the money for? So for example, ace pots or CTPs. And what is the function of your sponsorship? If you were fundraising or you're looking to raise money for a charity, to pay for the extras so that you don't have to charge the players for porta potties or their prizes. For myself, I like to hit the sponsors up for money, and I spend all that money on raffles for the players and get some really cool stuff. And all that money that we raise goes back into the Bronte Creek Club. So that's a big part of it. So the best way to hit up sponsors is it's kind of like the Girl Guide or cookie effect is hit up your work coworkers, your friends and your family, and members of your club. So if you know somebody who's got a business in their club and they feel that they want to help out and contribute, that's a great way to do it. Next is your local businesses. So every event has an impact on your surroundings. So for Bronte, we have Tim Hortons. So I always try to reach out to Tim Hortons and see if they're willing to give us some gift cards and stuff like that. You can hit up businesses in the industry like disc manufacturers or shoe and apparel. All the things that we use to do disc golf is backpacks and snacks and food and all that kind of stuff. And usually I do a lot of cold calling through the internet, like Facebook Messenger and Instagram. I find these companies and I just reach out to them asking if they have community reach out programs and things like that. So, and then finally, you're gonna need a contingency. I know Sanctioned Events says that you can do 15%, but if you find that you're gonna have extra hidden costs and stuff like that, it shouldn't come out of your pocket. So that's something you can pass along to the players' fees just to cover that basis. And if it becomes extreme, then you just have to fundraise more or work with your club to help pay for kind of some of that stuff that you may need.
Yeah.
So
Now, from experience, and this was a really tough section to choose to include today or not include, because it's tough to not get granular on this. We have an advanced presentation where we are going to go into every single darn step of budgeting, how to promote your event, etc. So that's another day, and that's going to be another half or hour long presentation. But we want to bring up some of this just to show you the breadth of what you're going to have to budget for. That financial contingency that Simon mentioned is so incredibly important. A lot of what we do nowadays is purchasing from the States too. So oftentimes what you'll do is you'll put your event together. You always want to put your event together before you come up with a sponsorship plan, because you want to know how much that event's going to cost you. And then you're going to have to balance that cost against whatever your sponsorship is. That financial contingency can make up for things like exchange rate changing. I'll order discs from Dynamic Disc, for instance. I'll order 200 custom stamped discs that are $5.50 a piece. So I'm budgeting approximately a 32% conversion rate. By the time they come here and I'm billed, I might have not realized that my credit card's charging me an extra 2.5%, and the conversion rate itself is at 37 now. So, if I have an event with 150 players times that percentage on that much merchandise, I could easily be in the whole $800 off the bat. And I've heard this story from so many TDs in the game, is that something like that comes up. Or for instance, duty is a huge one. If you ship using UPS nowadays and they catch you with a brokerage fee, you're automatically $300-400 in the hole where you didn't expect that expense in the first place. So we always recommend you budget that 15%. And this is not just for PDGA events, because PDGA events do allow the TD to budget 15% for a TD fee. We call that a contingency often. And we'll usually donate, when we're hosting an event, whatever's left of that fee to the home club or to whatever cause we're putting towards. But with an unsanctioned event too, it's a good practice, because there is so much that's going to come up, especially when it's your first tournament where you just didn't realize that you had to add that line item in your budget. So keep that 15% there. One thing I wanted to show you here too was fundraising is it's an art nowadays. Because a lot of what you're doing is you're trying to convince someone that there's, unless it's from the good of their hearts, that there's an ROI in what they're doing by investing into your event. And there are certain demographics or certain occupations, like local real estate agents, for instance, where they can donate $500 to you because they need one person to partake in their business, and all of a sudden they've got their ROI. But a lot of the time, a little bit more depth or insight with our demographic, disc golfers as a whole, who's coming to your event, the profile of your event, is really important in marketing that, so that you can solicit some of that sponsorship. Now, again, I hate to keep saying this today, but that's going to be part of the advanced session that we're doing, because it really does go in depth. We're going to have a fundraising session on its own, because it is an art. I wanted to show you that I did have this page over here. I think I opened it in this guy right here. Yeah. So this is just an example of, this is our preliminary fundraising page from the NOC. Northern Ontario Championship. And this is what I'll put this in the shared folder too. By the way, before everyone leaves tonight, I'm going to share the folder that has every single resource we're showing tonight in it. It also has the recording from last week's session and all the resources from that too. We had a club bylaw constitution template in there. So all those resources are in the same folder. I'll make sure we share that with everyone. But this is our Northern Ontario Championship. These are our sponsorship tiers. This is what we include. This is the depth we go with describing the branding and what they're going to be included in. We also always celebrate what successes we had the year prior. You always want to bring up, we had this many, there's this many rounds played, this was the economic impact. So something like this is something we would have used to solicit someone who's interested in like regional stimulus, for instance. This is what this is really pushing, is that, we're bringing this to the region. So a BIA, a business association, or someone who's a big part of that business association might be interested in this. Or, for instance, you may have heard we've got a Forefathers. They're a brewery in Cambridge. They sponsor the ODSA and a lot of our programming, and they've also installed a course there. Now, I know for a fact, because we get some of the metrics on the back end, that the average disc golfer makes $52,000 a year in Canada. They're a male between 25 and 35 years old. And when you approach companies like breweries and you tell them this information, they go, money signs in their eyes. This is exactly our prime demographic. So things like that are things you want to take into consideration when you're discussing with these sponsors, is how do I serve your reciprocation of this quid pro quo? If you're going to give me $500, how are you going to get it back? Whether it's an investment in the long run or just in the event as a whole. I work in marketing for my 9-to-5 job too. And I'll tell you what, I spend $1,500 a week in the ether on Google Ads. It's not a lot of money and if you can promise me a return that's even remotely close to something like this, and I get to take a different avenue and advertise in person or be present at the event, it's something I'm definitely going to be interested in. We'll have a session for that, and I highly recommend anyone who's looking to host an event, especially at scale, attend that one, because there's an art to soliciting money. Simon's phenomenal at it. Simon hits the ground really hard. He's part of the Knock fundraising crew this year, but he's continually impressed me with how he fundraises for the Brawny Creek Classic every year. That's one small, usually one-day event that he's consistently raising thousands of dollars for in both cash and prizes. So he's got a lot of insight when it comes to that. I just wanted to show you this though. This is a basic one pager you would present to someone like this, but a lot of the time context has to go along with this. You have to have that presentation prepared, and you have to know your audience, essentially who disc golfers are and what interest that donor might have in your audience. So getting back and off that train a little bit, event budgeting. Again, we're going to be presenting this in part 2, but we do have a disc golf event checklist too, and this is something we're going to present in part 2 as well, because there is so damn much to cover in this. A lot of the time, it's going to be maybe a self.
Uh-oh. Did we lose Chris?
I think so.
Chris broke the internet.
froze for me.
Well, he was talking about it. Maybe he's on like an ethereal plane or something. Because I had to look up that word. Like, I didn't know what it is. Sounded like something from Dungeons and Dragons.
All right, Simon is the host now because Oz just left.
This is where we need pre-planned elevator music for technical difficulties.
I'm really wishing I picked an unsanctioned event to start with now. There's nothing like jumping in both feet over my head.
While we're waiting for Oz to come back in, I'm just going to scroll down a couple of these questions and we can address some of the questions that people have been asking in the chat. So I think after Gloria, she said for juniors that want to play Worlds, they need PDGA. Oh, that's just a comment. The value of a PDGA sanctioned league, we did not address yet.
I am back, by the way. My internet.
There he is.
Sorry, guys.
We were just killing time with some extra questions.
No, I think that's fantastic. Thank you. Has anyone here ever hosted a PDGA sanctioned league? I have, but I prefer if you answer if someone else has, just to spread the love. No? Okay, I'm going to answer that really quickly while I am addressing this. So the value of a PGA sanctioned league is that you do get ratings for the players in the league. You pay $1 per week. There is no mass sanctioning fee for the league, but you do pay $1 per week per player. Now, those league rated rounds, depending on the tier of your event, and not a lot of people know kind of the ins and outs of this, but your rating holds a different weight based on tier. So an A tier event is 4 times the impact on your rating than a C tier event is. A league event is 1/10 the rating of a C tier event. So you literally multiply by a factor of 0.1, where a C tier would be a full 1. That might be a little mathy for people, but just to let you know, you have to pay 10 league rounds. You get the average of those 10 league rounds, and that'll count as the equivalent of a C tier event for your rating. So it doesn't have a massive impact. There's a reason it's a lot cheaper too, but it is a nice way to kind of gauge your progress, right? Knowing your rating depending on the weather and the wind and the conditions and relative to the other competitors in your field, it's not a terrible way to participate. And you don't have to be PDGA current you have to pay your $10 fee actually, but potentially to enter your score in for the week, you don't have to be PDGA current. So
Chris, that was my question. And the reason I brought it up is because we're trying to introduce sanctioned play to the, to the community.
Yeah.
And we're obviously only starting with a 9-hole course currently. So the thought process there was, does this make sense as an introductory way to encourage signups and participation, but not jumping in with a C-tiered sanction event? Because we don't have a good benchmark here in town locally we don't have access to a lot of tournaments close. So it's hard for us to establish a rating. So the thought process was, if we did a sanctioned league, albeit of course the points attributed are less, but it gives people a starting point, if nothing else.
Yeah, and they'll also have a greater perceived value of their membership, right? If they're purchasing their PDGA membership for the year and they're investing $50 to $75, depending on if they're amateur or pro, just having something that they can use it for feels like they've got their value from it, right?
Yeah, and then just so I'm clear, so if we had net new players sign up and just join the league, at what point throughout the season, I believe it's like a minimum of 6 weeks or something like that, if I was reading correctly, at what point during the league will somebody have an established rating if they've never been a member before?
So as long as you enter those league rounds, it will be the next update following. So the PDGA puts out deadlines in the summer. It's every month. But they put out deadlines where if your event is finalized, and for a league it's really easy to finalize it for the week, but if your event's finalized, then it will be on the next rating update. So you only need one rating to be on a rating update. However, you need a minimum of, I want to say, and this is me speculating because it's off the top of my head and they've changed this, I want to say 6 rated rounds in the last calendar year or 6 months to be a propagator. So if you don't have active PDGA players in your region and you're trying to establish a league, you can't generate ratings until you have propagators. This is often a problem with PDGA events in divisions where a small division such as MA3 or FA3 is going to play a shorter layout than everyone else, and you only have 6 players in that division, 2 of which are PDGA current, 1 of which is a propagator. You don't have an adequate number of propagators, you won't get ratings for those players. So you know what, it builds up propagators in your region too, to have everyone participating. That way when you do have your PDGA events, you have a little bit of leeway as a TD. As we can send a smaller group off the shorts because we have a few propagators in town, and they'll actually get ratings for what they're doing. Because I've seen events where there's a division of 12 new players, none of them are PDGA propagators, and they think they're going to get their first rating, and they in fact don't. So you have to be careful too that with your league, playing from the same tees at first when you don't have a ton of propagators, just so that everyone can get a rating, is important.
Yeah, that's good. And then, sorry, I don't want to have too much time with this, but I just have one last point because I don't quite understand this. Is the point system? What is the value of points to let's say us who don't play a lot of events?
So as can a lot of the time, qualifying for events on the amateur side of things, the points is the important aspect. However, because we're from Canada, we get a lot of allowances. So for junior worlds and amateur worlds and whatnot, we don't have nearly the requirement that Americans do to go participate. So oftentimes, if you have 2 events under your belt for the year, you'll qualify for Am Worlds or Junior Worlds. Gloria, I think, was in here, and she's taken Ricky and Alejandro, her 2 young kids, to Junior Worlds this year. And I know that they didn't play a ton of events last year. For their age, they played a ton of events. But in the grand scheme of things, you have a lot of Americans playing 15 to 25 events a year to get the points necessary. But in Canada, playing one to 2 events and having a field of 50 or more at one of those events is more than enough to qualify you for those things. I've never seen an issue with Canadians or international players attending point-based qualification events. And so I think the only tough one is the U.S. Amateur Championship, the one at Toboggan at the Toboggan course in Michigan, but that's kind of a specialty event anyways. Am Worlds is the big one, and Canadians qualify really easily nowadays.
Yeah, appreciate that, Chris. Thank you so much.
No worries. I mean, even the PDGA doesn't use the points for their elite series now because it's the Disc Golf Pro Tour that's taken over. Now Disc Golf Pro Tour points are the big thing, so they don't really use them for pros anymore. That being said, I'm going to hop back to this so we get this done. We have a question and answer period moving forward. But execution was the last thing we wanted to talk about, and it did go hand in hand with budgeting. So, one of the things that I continually experience, one of the issues I see with a lot of people hopping into the event registration game, and these are people or event hosting game, people who don't necessarily host at their own clubs, but have ideas of hosting across Ontario or making money hosting events in Ontario. And there's been these entities in the past, is that you have to get not just a permit but permission to host on these courses. So a lot of the times Ontario is really grounded in a system where there is almost a club for every course that acts as that steward. And so I think they get right of refusal for events oftentimes too, because they're the ones invested, they're the ones accountable to that course in that region. And so not just booking a permit with the city and showing that proof of insurance, that's not the only important thing, but going through the club first and taking the proper avenues to host that event. Before you even start planning, make sure you reach out to, for instance, at White Spruce, the White Spruce Disc Golf Club. Not that anyone's trying and Corey would welcome it, but at Mountain View, you would reach out to the St. Joseph Disc Golf Association or Disc Golf Club first before you even thought about hosting an event there, because they are the stewards for the course, they're the ones doing the maintenance and who installed it and sweating it out. So that's always the proper avenue to take. And I always have people who might not see eye to eye, and there's a little bit of politicking going on oftentimes, and that's somewhere where the ODSA can help too. If you're having issues with a local entity that's kind of the steward for a course or a steward for a region, and there's no good reason that they're not allowing you to host on their property other than they want the monopoly on it, then definitely reach out to the ODSA. We're happy to arbitrate on that. And we've done this in the past too. There's been plenty of examples where, people get really, 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 what's the word? Someone fill this in for me. I don't know.
There can be some gatekeeping.
Yeah, there's gatekeeping. Exactly. They're protective over their region or their course, when really we couldn't host enough disc golf events across Ontario if we wanted to. If everyone in this conversation hosted 5 events more per year, there still would be selling out every event in Southern Ontario. We would still be a healthy community. We'd probably be a healthier community, to be honest. But that's something we can definitely help with. Again, execution, determining what type of event. Maybe before you even approach them, what are you hosting? If it's a league or a league is something where that gatekeeping may even be a bigger issue, because a lot of the time a club or a local club goes hand in hand with a local league as well. However, there's often times where that's shared between it may be a women's league and not a men's league, but an open league and a women's league. And those two things have to exist in unison. There's people in this conversation right now who know and fully understand that more than anyone too. And there can't be any gatekeeping when it comes to that. There are certain demographics that need to be served, and there's no overlap when it comes to that. But again, we can arbitrate when we need to. If there's anyone that needs the ODSA's help in that regard, that's why we're here. But when you determine what type of event, you have to also determine, are you going to use tee times? Are you going to use a shotgun start? Are you going to use a flex start? And I know this is the basics, so those might be foreign terms to a lot of people. That's how you're going to organize, how you're going to host this event. Are people going to go off in foursomes at set times throughout the day, oftentimes only playing one round for a day? Are you going to set a foursome or a threesome or a fivesome on every hole and have everyone start at the same time? That would be a shotgun start. Or are you going to have a flex start event where you allow people to show up at their leisure between a set defined time and tee off in a group of 3 or more? If it's an unsanctioned event, they can tee off in a group of 1 for all they want. So that's another difference between sanctioned and unsanctioned events. But a lot of the time, if you have a more laid back event, a lot of the specialty events, for instance, are flex start events, because you show up. A lot of the value in the events, not necessarily in the competition, but in the players pack that you receive and kind of the fun format you're playing. So a flex start event where it's a little bit looser is a great solution, and you can also often get more players on the course. Shotgun start is limited to oftentimes 4 people per how many holes you have on the course. And that's it. So most 18-hole courses can adequately hold 72 players at a time. And so a shotgun start would kind of limit you. And then tee times, depending on what time of year it is, if you're in the summer when you have a lot of daylight, you can often get up to 250 people on the same course throughout the day. So it's a great way to increase your capacity. So those are things you definitely have to consider when you're thinking about the execution of your event. And those things will also change your budget. The more AMs you have in an event, the more flexible your event often ends up being, especially if it's a sanctioned event, because amateurs often expect their registration fees to be put towards things where margin is present, like players pack discs, trophies, or merch outs. And oftentimes, disc golf manufacturers build in about an 80% margin to what they're doing. And so that TD has a lot more flexibility with what they're doing as well. Now, in sanctioned events, pros severely, I won't say the pros themselves, but the standards severely limit what you can spend a pro's money on without just giving it back to them. You can only spend it on pass-through fees for the gate and anything associated with sanctioning or tour series fees. You cannot pay for a pro's lunch and take that out of their registration fee. You have to give it back to them. You cannot give a pro a player's pack and take that out of their registration fee. You have to give it back to them. So oftentimes, especially with pro heavy events, TDs are really handcuffed with kind of reusing the registration money to build in any buffer for themselves. And that's where fundraising comes in handy, especially with larger pro events where mandatory added cash is necessary. So really, why we focused so heavily on the type of event you're hosting at the beginning is because it really is a trickle-down effect and a cascade towards, how are we going to budget and execute this thing? Scoring options nowadays, if it's a PDJ event, they have their own scoring solution. Just a precursor or a note for everyone, you do have to have a paper scorecard. Yeah.
Just before you go into that one, in the formats, the division types, so the color divisions versus the standard divisions.
Yes. That's something I would probably say for the advanced, but with PDJ specifically, and even in unsanctioned events nowadays, a lot of people use PDGA guidelines and rules when they're hosting anyways, because there are a nice set of guidelines as far as rating goes, or the tiers per gender or what have you, but there are different ways, again, like Pat suggested there, to delegate where someone might belong or compete in your event. You're going to have to consider color-based or rating-based divisions. Gender is not a factor. It's going to be just based solely on the player's rating. And then when you have our standard AM, FPO, MPO, MA3, FA3 divisions that are gender-based, you're going to have a bit of a different environment. Now, from feedback, we have a women's committee who's discussed this, and there's a national women's committee too. I think the general consensus is, and Colleen's here, and she'd be a great person to give feedback on that too. The general consensus is that oftentimes women are more comfortable playing with other women, and so that's something to consider when you are hosting an event where you could have a ratings-based division rather than specifically a women's rating-based division like an FA3 or an FA2. But the culture behind the competition is really something you want to consider at the very least when doing that, and reaching out to your player base. If you can do it, if you can throw a survey out, or if you're a smaller community, ask. It's the best way to get direct feedback, even about layouts. Hey, FA1s, do you want to play the longs or the shorts? Hey, MPOs, do you want to play the longs or the shorts one round? Always reach out. But that being said, once you establish what you're doing, the scoring options with the PDGA, there is only one scoring option. You have to have a backup. UDisc is a great resource for leagues nowadays. It's a free resource. I know you have to pay for UDisc Pro, but you can still use the UDisc League feature for most of your players anyways. It's free to sign up for UDisc Leagues. You can keep a live scoreboard. It tracks stats and scores over time. You can do your payouts based on it. It's a fantastic resource. If you want more information on UDisc, you can always reach out to one of the ODSA members. I think a lot of us use it. I'm not sure Corey does, but we do at Brawny Creek right now. I'm more than happy to help set that up. I think that's something that we're also going to put in the advanced session as well. Paper scorecards always work. If you're like me and you've been playing for 12 years, you remember scoreports and paper scorecards and doing it the old-fashioned way. It's nice nowadays being able to track your scores as you play, but it's a little more nerve-wracking for certain too. Then we get into budgeting. Depending on the type of event, if it's a league, it's a lot easier just to delegate, what portion of the fees are going to payouts versus what portion's going to the club versus Ace Pot versus CTP. That's something you always have to think about. When it comes to budgeting, one thing I wanted to bring up earlier was this transparency Simon mentioned earlier. So unfortunately or fortunately, there's definitely a culture in Ontario with events that players feel entitled to a transparency for where their money is going. Now, with the PDGA, it's understandable that there's a set of guidelines, and it's obvious when those guidelines aren't being met oftentimes. However, I have encountered situations personally where you might be paying X amount for a greens fee, and players may not agree that you should be paying that much for the greens fee. So a lot of the time, the way to circumvent that is to advertise ahead of time what you're spending their money on if you don't want to have to deal with that. Now, there is an accountability to the PDGA when you have a sanctioned event, And there's an accountability to yourself and your players base when you don't, when it's an unsanctioned event. However, there's no mandatory level of transparency. I'm just suggesting that it helps to offer that transparency up front a lot of the time with what you're doing. When people know what they're spending their money on ahead of time, it's a lot harder to complain about it. And it's something that every TD will encounter. So there's always a critic. There's always someone unhappy with what you're doing. You have to power through it, and you're going to get a lot of great feedback for your event too. So really lean into that if you can. I think, is Spencer still here by any means?
I am.
Yes, I think you're a great example because you just hosted your first big event at White Spruce, and it went off without a hitch. Other than the fact you couldn't be there, but you did all the work leading up, and then Pat, who's also here, was your day of surrogate, I'll call him.
Yeah.
Would that be pretty accurate that there's always a critic out there, no matter what you're trying to do to meet everyone's needs? I think maybe your anecdote or your experience would be valuable here.
I think it was, I had a lot of great feedback, but then I also experienced it, and I had a great kind of like a group behind the scenes that were always there. And like when I was frustrated about something, I had that. So that's one of the recommendations I'd say, but it was like one of those things. I posted the registration, not really knowing the true demand for the sport right now. I don't know who. I went from a 1 day, possibly 80 players, up to a 2 day with 190 players.
And a wait list still, right?
Pardon?
And a wait list.
And a wait list still, yeah. So it was one of those things, is the demand was absolutely insane. So I didn't expect that. And within less than an hour of registration opening, I had people calling me out on Facebook saying, this is stupid. Like, I've been playing for blah, blah, blah years, and my division gets discredited. So it's like one of those things, is no matter what you do, like you're going to have critics. And the one thing I always found is you're never, if you're going to fight back against them, it's not, you make more, or you catch more bees with honey, right? So if you try to work with people will generally give some help. And it's one of those things, is you're not going to please everyone.
No. And you'll run yourself ragged if you try to. That's why I'm really emphasizing this. The planning portion of this, determining what you want to do and your goals here, is more important than all the feedback you're eventually going to get or the stress you're going to have to deal with. Because if you have a defined mission, a defined standard that you're going to meet, and a defined format for your event, and you stick to it, you've accomplished your goal. A lot of people aren't going to agree with you. This is just the way it goes. Again, I'm 65 events in. I've never had an event where everyone's happy. And I don't think it exists, to be honest. I've had many events where 99% of the people are happy, and that's a success. You just have to be prepared for it, and that this is just kind of the landscape the way it is right now. Just putting that out there ahead of time. I wish someone had warned me ahead of time. So it is truly rewarding in the long run anyways. And you're going to have so many more friends out of this than you will critics, but that's just something to mention. So after budgeting, which Simon talked about, and we'll go in greater depth with the advanced session, course prep.
Just one thing to add, us. A great rule of thumb for the feedback that comes your way as the TD when you're starting out is that, from my experience, if more than one or two people come to you with the same question, make a public post about it on your page, your event page, or do an email, and don't get into, especially if it's a negative thing, don't get into a back and forth with a single person, because it's going to drag a lot of time down, and a lot of people need to know about that anyway. So if more than a couple people want to know, make the public post. It'll save a lot of time and keeps your people informed all the way through.
Absolutely. And that's a good segue to, I think, what I'm about to mention here too, which is after budgeting comes course prep. You want to make sure your course is looking as good as humanly possible. You have to get a volunteer team together. No one person can put a course together, can flag a course, the OBs, put together all the collateral that's necessary. Now, when I say collateral, I mean this is a player's guide ahead of the tournament. This is a set of tee times if you're doing tee times and letting people know ahead of time, or an organized schedule for the day. You won't believe how many people ask you when lunch is over. Putting that in a player's guide and on a sign in front of you, these are things you have to think about ahead of time, but aren't obvious, I think, to most people doing their first tournament. So when I say collateral, I mean prepare, post what you need to post and then some. Anything that you can dream up being necessary for day of, post it. The OB rules, make sure it's in digital format, and then bring a small sheet of OB rules for the day of as well if you have that. When it comes to clubs, for instance, post the rules for your club on your UDIS scorecard, as well as the banner on your Facebook page. These are all things we do so that everyone is aligned and understanding the same thing. And I say contingency. This is something that's really important too, is that, assume that it might be raining the day of your event, or it might be a lightning storm. In the planning phase, what are you going to do? Do you have a contingency date? Or can you play the Sunday? If it's a 4-round event, can you just play the 2 rounds the second day? Who's your backup TD? This is great for Spencer and Pat. Again, Pat was able to step in and host the day of event at the Grip and Ripped Winter Thaw, I think it was called. So, all of these things are things you have to think about ahead of time. A co-TD, and I know Simon put this in his budgeting section, I think, and then we erased it because it was part of that contingency. But having a co-TD and a support staff is really, really important. No matter if it's a small 20-person event or a large 150-person event, it's really important. And then dealing with sign-in and players meetings, make sure that ahead of time you have these things delegated. These are essentially presenting your collateral to the players as your players meeting. Any day of adjustments you had to make. Sign in when people show up, they get their players pack. This always takes longer than you think it's going to take, but always make sure that you have ample volunteers for this, that you have a time period delegated to do this, and that you stick to that time frame. Especially with fringe season, fall and spring events, a lot of the time daylight is a factor. So sticking to a timeline and putting that together ahead of time is really important. Then again, scores, sorting, standings. These are things that I would highly recommend you come to the advanced session for, especially if you're doing a PDGA sanctioned event. Their back end for scoring and sorting and issuing tee times and or starting holes is a little bit convoluted, and it's something you want to experience with ahead of time. But this takes quite a bit of capacity, and if you don't have a volunteer team helping you out with the other things, just going and sorting scorecards so that the round after lunch is seamless and everyone's been assigned a hole is quite a task. So this is something you want to prepare for, and this is something I would highly, again, recommend come up to that next session, because we're going to be talking about that. Awards and payouts at the end of the day, making sure that these are prompt, making sure you have everything set up ahead of time, making sure that your payouts for the pros are already in envelopes, and let them split the money up at the end of the day if they tie for a position, or your merch outs are there already in envelopes ahead of time. These are really important things, is preparation for all of this. And then event consolidation and follow-ups. And I put this here because if you want to run more than one event moving forward and you don't thank your sponsors after your event, you've made a big mistake, because they're not going to sponsor you next year. If you don't tag them in your social media posts, if you don't share that you're thankful, ask your players to reach out to the sponsors. Kara and Jeff are fantastic at this when it comes to running events for themselves and that follow-up and that catering to your sponsors. Going and submitting your PDGA fees on time. If you have a PDGA sanctioned event, you have to submit your fees within, depending on the tier, anywhere from 72 to 48 hours to 24 hours. So making sure that you're squared up, your scores are finalized, all your standings are proper, everyone's entered correctly, that's really important. And it's kind of the easy part of an event, but it can really screw up your event if you've had a great experience and then you don't finish it properly. Player doesn't feel whole because their rating wasn't entered properly. That can really screw things up. But these are all things we want to get more advanced on, obviously, and we were trying to be as general as possible today. Our presentation went really, really long, but I want to open it up to Q&A right now too. If anyone has questions, regardless if it's PDGA, advanced, or just simple, or you have something on your mind, please bring it up now.
Mine's a software issue. I dove in way over my head with a sanctioned event for the Women's Global. And from what I understand, there's a bunch of computer software stuff, something, and paperwork after the tournament that I have to fill out. I've just sort of got links and I'm looking through the PDGA on it. I know that seems silly, especially with the whole Zoom and digital world, but for me, especially being a very visual person, at least everything I found, I can't see this software unless there's a tournament live and it's happening. So I don't know if it's something that somebody could screenshot, record on a phone, or kind of be like, hey, here's how you make cards. Here's how you delete the person who you thought was going to show up was sick the day of your tournament. Because I have absolutely zero idea what that looks like. And as far as I can tell, there's no like online tutorial for how to use this software.
There's no cohesive online tutorial, I'd say, Andrea. And we are absolutely, this is our next session. This is going to be the one following advocating for growth in your region. So this is not 2 weeks, this is 3 weeks from today. It will be the next session we do, the advanced session, and we're going to walk you through setting up essentially a sanctioned event. We're going to talk you through tour standards. We're going to do the disc golf scene setup. We're going to do the scoring on the back end of PDGA.com. We're going to make sure this one's filmed too. So if you can't be there, it will be filmed for you. But that's really important. This is the next step. But we definitely just wanted to present today, you know, the options you have as a tournament director or an event director first before we kind of get in depth. Most people end up taking that avenue with sanctioned events, or even if you're not doing a sanctioned event, but you want to know how to use disc golf scene to register your event, it's going to be super helpful too. I promise it will help. You will understand this after.
That was my tomorrow project. I've input about 90% of the stuff for disc golf scene. I just haven't clicked go because I just realized that if I wanted to offer a player lunch option, which I'm hoping to do, that they can actually pay for lunch by just adding the item in disc golf scene.
Yep.
So I'm literally just waiting for the menu from the person I'm working with for lunch to add that. Would you say it is better for me to wait then 3 weeks to put it up on disc golf scene before that other session happens? Because that didn't seem too complicated to me.
So connect your event and reach out to me privately. If you, I would say open your registration as soon as you can. Disc golf scene is connected to PDGA.com, so there's an API that populates your player list in on the PDGA site as well. So make sure that you have it connected. And if it's not yet, reach out to me. Anyone in this conversation, if you're hosting something and you want to open registration sooner than later, reach out. I'll help you connect your event to disc golf scene so that it's populating the PDGA side of things too. And it eliminates the redundancy of entering everyone manually after they register. It's going to save you a lot of time. And then when you delete them from your event, they'll also be removed from the PDGA event too. So if someone withdraws on disc golf scene, they'll withdraw from the PDGA page too. It's saved a lot of time, but yeah, there's definitely a bit of a learning curve when it comes to how to do your budgeting on the back end of the PDGA site and doing the scoring, and it's a little bit buggy when it comes to tee times and hole assignments, but we figured it out over time, and that's what we're going to address in the advanced session next. But reach out to me definitely, Andrea, even tomorrow during the day, anytime if you're, or in the evening, and I'll help you connect.
Enter all of that in disc golf scene. Is it editable afterwards?
Is it, what's that?
Like how much of it and what can be edited afterwards?
So you can edit everything. You can add options on, but it won't add those options to the previously registered attendees. So I'm going to go into one of our events. So the Northern Ontario Championship. This is our A-tier event. I'll go on the back end right now. You'll see the PDGA.com link. This is what I'm talking about right now. You have to have your tournament ID here. All you have to do is put that tournament ID in. It's the link that you'll see when you actually click here. I know I'm doing a little bit of the advanced tutorial. This number after your tournament right here, 57632, this is mine. Yours is going to be different. If you pop that into the PDGA tournament link here and press update PDGA.com link, it'll all of a sudden just connect the two. It's a dream. And then when you want to add questions to your registration, which are going to be down here, or this is your divisions and whatnot, the questions are way under them. If you want to add questions like this, you can always add them. It's just not going to add them to the players who've previously registered. You'd have to reach out to those players and say, can you go back into your registration and alter those? And then you're going to have to open up registration so that players can alter their own registration. It makes it a little bit convoluted. So I would definitely recommend getting those questions sorted before opening that. And this is my approach to all tournaments. Figure out exactly what you want and then execute on it. And don't change it along the way unless you absolutely have to.
The other question I have is maybe more WGE specific, but the ladies in Niagara are super excited. Like if this registration was open like a month ago, they would be ecstatic and over the moon, which is great. But I'm trying to kind of go as like step as I can. I wonder if there's a good explanation or some type of document that I can help them for choosing their division. Because
there is.
Some of them, like I've explained sort of the difference between choosing, say, an FA3 spot versus a protected category. But then it's sort of questions like someone said, well, could I compete in an age protected category but play on so-and-so's card? And I'm like, I don't really know. Like, I don't think there's an issue with it, but I don't know necessarily how the cards are set up. If they're playing, you know, if I have 4 players that are all registered for FA3, do they have to play on that card together? Or could it be 2 of the FA65 ladies with 2 FA3 players? Because I hate to say there's 2 factors at play. Some of the people want to choose the category where they are best fit based on ability or age. Some of the other players just want to play with certain people and be girls in every sense of the word. Be like, I'm not going unless I can play with her on my card. So I don't really know how to answer that question for them. And I don't want them to start registering in disc golf scene, even though I'm going to allow them to change. I don't know, like it's still months before the event. And this is what the conversation is centered around right now, is which category I'm going to play in, who I'm going to be playing against, and who I get to play with on the day of the event.
So when we used to run the Ontario Women's Championship, we actually had a great rundown on these divisions. I'm just trying to find that for you right now.
We copied it from your previous events into our event from last year. So if you go on Disc Golf Scene and look up the Ladies of the Creek,
let's do that. Awesome. Thank you, Colleen. Ladies of the Creek.
You might have to put the in front. I don't know.
It kind of became like school all over. That they're all like, who's going to sit with me and who do I get to play with and who can I eat lunch?
Yeah, on the left side, the tournaments column, there's only one there.
Oh, sorry.
Left, yeah.
And is it going to be in the down here?
Yeah, in that. So we had like a rundown trying to explain like, so Oz had done a great job of kind of qualifying like what kind of things you might think about, like how far you might throw, or it is, I think, a little bit specific to Bronte. Like, I think it talks about keypads maybe, but yeah.
I could at least look at it as an example and use it for the St. Catherine's course and kind of just.
And I think Pat put the link to the actual pdga.com/division. So that's like the recommendations in the chat.
I find the PDGAs is a little bit skewed for what I would use. Andrea, I'm going to post this in, I can't copy and paste it for some reason. So I'm just going to give you the link here and you can scroll down. There we go. So it's in the chat right now. You can see it there. You obviously you can adjust it to what you feel is adequate if you feel like your region needs something different. It's calling spot on, but I think it's a good outline.
I think within that document too, we explained what the M meant. So if it's like FM 40, like female masters 40, or like J means junior. So that's in there as well, because that ends up being some of the questions you'll get for the women's event. And just about the like end of the tournament thing, Andrea, it is pretty straightforward. Like the website that the PDGA has for you to input, because I think you're talking about like at the end you have to submit a TD report. There is some details in there that's why Oz's comments about having your budget kind of organized is very important. But it's very basic questions like how much did your players pack value have and like things like that. And it takes you like 5 minutes to fill out, and it's not super stressful. So don't stress too much about it is my point. It's not super hard. It's pretty intuitive.
The actual thing is a little less stressful because I mean, it's summer and I'm off the Monday after the event. So I can sit there and plug away at it. Yeah. It's more the day of the event that I know last year in Bronte, like you had a woman who played in the morning and didn't play in the afternoon. Then you had to shuffle the cards like 5 minutes before they had to go out. There was someone, I think Chanel didn't show up. There was a person who was sick. And like that kind of stuff is, I'm way more of a pre-planner. So like I started pecking away at this in November and I'm glad I did, because that little list that Oz had up there, I'm about halfway done that list already. And at least the way I'm going to have way more sponsorship and way more money than I need for my budget. So that part of it is wonderful. But just sort of the day of and things that I might have to deal with, or how I input the scores. You know, I'm making sure to do a 90-minute lunch, so I've left myself a lot of time. But it's just more the day of stuff that is
Are you going to the spring fling this weekend?
No.
If you're available either of the days, I wonder if maybe that would be something good you could do in the next month or two, is find an event that you can make it to and ask the TD if you can just look over their shoulder and see the PD, like a sanctioned one, because they'll be using the PDGA website, and see if you could just, watch how they do it and maybe get some experience that way.
It was Mother's Day. Like, it's just a bad weekend. It's not something I could swing either way. And I've been looking to see if there were tournaments nearby, even in the States, if I can just look over someone's shoulder and sort of watch it. I just don't know why no one sort of basically filmed or recorded that process, so it can just be something like on YouTube or a link that I watch.
The one thing I can say from my event, I'm also a pre-planner. I did a ton of pre-planning, and it was one of those things that I even had Pat with less than 72 hours notice step in and take over. A lot of the time when you do have these situations where people don't show, it kind of have to have a contingency. If someone doesn't show, as long as you're not on a card of 3, if they're on a card of 3, then that makes it a lot tougher. But most of the time you have cards of 4 or 4 women playing together. If one doesn't show, you can still play them as a 3. So like you can have 3 go out. So that's not a super hard thing. And also, like, a lot of it, if you follow, I know that PDGA has a great checklist that I used a lot, but if you follow that and you kind of give your players like a heads up and you just stay transparent, like I probably sent out 15, 20 emails to my players before the event, like, hey, this is what I'm working on. Can people check this over? This is OBs. And with a Women's Day event, I don't know if it's as challenging. For me, I had a pro division where I had pros emailing me every night. Oh, is this OB or is this in bounds? So they'll pick it apart. But with the women, they're there to have the fun, enjoyable part. So with the most of the day of stuff, as long as you kind of have a contingency plan, if this person doesn't show or if no one shows, this is what happens. Then you just apply it to any situation, and it's pretty good. There's not a lot of situations that will catch you completely off guard.
I'm just going to mention why this did, because Andrea was there last year. The Women's Global event is an event that you don't have to play both rounds. So there is the option for women to only play the first round for FA4 and juniors. So when she was referring to that, we had people leave halfway through the day, not say anything, reshuffled the cards. And in that circumstance, you actually have to remove them from the PDGA thing. And so we were trying to make cards, and every time we shuffled them, it would go back and revert back to what we had because we hadn't deleted those people out. So it's a weird circumstance. That's why the Women's Global events actually almost a little bit more complicated with that, because you have to remove people. So those kind of things, like Andrea's saying, like you said, it rarely comes up, but when it does, it's kind of surprising there's no how-to videos from the PDGA themselves.
It's a good thing the ODSA exists, because we're about to make one.
Yes.
So I'm going to just open up the floor, or else we're going to do all this.
Record the screen or something, you can do that where you record your screen and you're actually entering and doing things.
Yeah.
I just thought, if that was a tutorial, it would be so much easier, because even though, I might be able to make that soft and Brantford, but I don't want to be in someone's way and underneath their nose. I was post-surgical last year, so any help I could provide, it was just an extra body to be there, but I didn't want to be in someone's way and asking them about what they're doing and why in the moment that they just need to do it.
And it's with the saw there in Brantford. Me and Patty are working together on that one. So it's one of those things. I'm just the assistant. So if you want to tag along with me, I'll be there on the day of, and I can answer any questions, and I don't mind about that. So that offer, Pat will be a lot more busy, but you can definitely tag along. I'm only the assistant at the event and stuff like that. So
I'm 95% sure I can make that one, because I think the Nico event at Bronte is the weekend before, and we're doing that with the kids. So I think that weekend I'm clear.
All right, guys, we're going to take the rest of this outside because the Leafs are going to go into the third period soon enough. And if we don't get to these questions, I'm not going to get to watch that awesome third period where they come back from the 3-1 lead that Tampa has. Just so it's out there, if anyone does have any other questions tonight, please ask them now. This is being recorded, so we'll share this, so they could be pertinent to more than just yourself. But I do urge everyone to show up to the advanced tutorial or the advanced session, especially if you're hoping to host a Mike, but especially if you're hoping to host a PDGA event. I'm actually going to register an event and go through the entire process. It's going to be one of the events we're hosting this year, so you'll see it from beginning to end with Disc Golf CNN and the PDGA.com.
Chris, really quickly, where is it going to be shared? Because I mean, I think our community needs to be kind of privy to this, but where is it shared? The recording, I should say.
This video, or which record? All the recordings will be posted on our social channel, and we have a new website coming up. It's being built as we speak, so everything's going to be posted there as a resource. We are a disc golf centric organization now too, so we redesigned our site to be focused on disc golf only, and so you'll see there'll be a resources section with that. But on social, we'll have posted all our videos by the time that comes in. They'll be on our YouTube channel as well.
Okay, so not the ODSA Facebook, or it'll be on the ODSA Facebook?
They'll be on the ODSA Facebook too. So
okay.
we'll be sharing the YouTube links for everything.
All right, appreciate it. Thanks so much, Chris. Appreciate it.
No worries. I know Mike had a question because I saw Quinty disc golf.
Oh yeah, that was me. Sorry. So who would be, like at the ODSA or whatever, who would be a good point of contact? Like, I know the recordings and all that are going to go up, but let's say we swing on an event this year and we just want to go over a few things, or like have somebody at the ODSA to reach out to as, like for a little extra guidance. Who would be the point of contact for that?
You could, in general, just reach out to Corey and Simon's still here. Corey and Simon have a lot of experience with this too. So do I. What I think we could do is one thing we've been discussing is creating a group email account that forwards to a few of us when there are questions regarding either insurance or tournaments, because there are a few people who can answer them, and capacity help is going to be welcomed big time. So I think what you'll probably end up seeing is like an info@ email going out soon. That's going to be a group email, and there'll be people qualified to answer beyond just myself there, because we do have a super qualified board now. So I would just say that might be something we'll prioritize before this weekend.
Okay.
Specifically, I know Angelica is going to do a lot of our communications, just like the general day-to-day communication stuff too. So our responsiveness is probably going to be really, really good soon.
Yeah, she's actually really good. I bug her twice a week.
Oh, good.
For stuff. Yeah. So we're good. Yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks.
No worries. Info at... All right. Anyone else have any questions before we call that a night?
I just want to mention I actually did find some YouTube videos from PDGA. If you look in the chat, I posted one of them. But if you do Google search the PDGA tournament director system and go to videos, there are a few videos there. There's one from 2021 that I just posted in the chat. And it actually does go through the scoring system. So there's, oh, it didn't come. Yeah, videos. Yeah. If you take out video in the Google search, it might come up.
Let's click this.
Tournament. Its interface is set up for you to follow step by step from tournament setup to scoring to payouts. Tournament Central completely interoperates with the existing tournament manager features.
It doesn't look like this. That's the weird part.
No, I think as you go along, it might look a little bit more.
For a certain task, you're free to switch back and forth, and all of your data will be displayed. Enable digital scorecard and enter an access code here. You can distribute this access code to your players on the day of the event so they can sign in and keep score. The access code is not case dependent, so they don't have or disable this feature at any time.
I'm just going to skip a little bit, just so we don't have to listen to every little part. I want to see how...
Or some combination of
Okay.
them that you will use for the tournament. Click the Add a Layout button and select the course. Even if you load an existing layout, you can still make change their digital scorecards when they're playing the page. Repeat this for just tournament manager. This concludes the process.
Yeah, this is definitely a pretty good, I would say, overview for sure. I think there's definitely probably going to be some work with regards to actually doing the scoring. Some of the layout issues that this does have there, the bugs in the layouts are things that we've encountered at provincials, especially, which didn't help. But this is awesome as a first step, Andrea, and then definitely show up for the advanced session too. And we'll go through actually scoring, going from round to round, removing people from the scorecard, whatever. All the little stuff that might pop up. And then we'll put it on video too. It'll probably be 35 minutes long, but it is what it is. Cool. Is anyone here who's still in the chat thinking of hosting a PDGA tournament for the first time this year? I know we don't have a ton of people left here because it's getting late, but... I'm going to say no then.
It would depend really where our course and organization is at. Filling one wouldn't be difficult.
No.
So we've talked a little bit about it.
Yeah, I can agree for that. I'm part of the Quinny area there, and it would definitely fill up with even just locals, I think, at this point. So,
do you think there'd be an issue with PDGA memberships in the region right now, like or people traveling from
No,
Quinny?
we all have so Travis and Wally in the chat are out here with us in the Quinny region, and like we all played the Stones Throw one, piles of locals out there, and everybody has their numbers, so it wouldn't be a huge issue.
Now I have to see how everyone did here.
yeah, it filled up in under 2 hours.
Oh, just don't look at round 2 and we're okay.
No, look at round 2 perfectly for me. It's great.
Oh, no, I threw a triple bogey on the second hole around 2.
I think when it comes to any tournament in probably a 4-hour, 5-hour drive of Toronto, it will fill night of opening registration, from what I've witnessed so far.
Everybody here, keep your names or your eyes out for Joe and Carter Yeomans. They're coming up.
Those kids are so good out here.
They've won MA3 like hands down.
Yeah, he's
900 rated rounds. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Tobin played with them. Yeah.
My lord.
First round I was with him, but not after that.
Something I do want to bring up, and this is because we have St. Joe's, Sioux, and Quinny here right now. You may know we do the Ontario Club Championship every year, and for that we try to reach out to every region in Ontario to host an event for it. We offer financial support and an ACE challenge too, so if someone aces we give you all the branding and stuff to put up, but if someone aces whatever hole you choose, it can be the shortest hole in your course. They get this year a Squatch bag full of Forefathers light lager. It's like a $750 prize. It's awesome. And we support you with a financial donation to the event as well. If you are thinking of hosting an event this year, let me know if it's going to be something to scale, because we don't have your region in particular, and we're always looking for new representation in kind of these underrepresented locations right now. So like we do Thunder Bay as our Northern Ontario. We also do Sudbury as our near north. We don't have an Ottawa event specifically decided on this year, and a far Western Ontario one too. So anyone here who's looking to host something that is in a region that doesn't traditionally have a lot of tournaments will definitely support that this year as part of our Ontario Club Championship too.
Hey Chris, just a quick question.
Yeah.
What about Muskoka area?
Yeah.
Okay, then I got a couple questions for you afterwards.
Sure.
Just a few things that.
Cool. Unless anyone has another question tonight, then let's call it. Third period awaits.
Yeah.
Thanks, Chris.
Cool. I'll stay on for anyone who wanted to talk to me after.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'm gonna
Thanks,
stop
guys.
recording now too, so don't worry about it.
Thanks a lot, Chris. Appreciate it.
No worries, guys.